Hello everyone, this is Bruno Bianchi Sarcone. I run SpainGuru.es, and today's the Spanish non-lucrative visa webinar. Today's date is October 22nd, 2025. It's a special day because this is the last day to apply for the Ley de Memoria Democrática, or Spanish citizenship by descent. This law ends exactly today. It is a sad day for everyone who couldn't meet the deadline for applying for the Spanish passport by descent. So yes, if you want to read more, I just published an article on SpainGuru.es about this. So yes, today we're going to talk about the Spanish non-lucrative visa. And remember, you can ask your questions in the chat box in the bottom right corner of your screen, right here. And remember to add a question mark at the end of your question, so it's easy for me to see that you asked something. I'm going to go through all the questions after the presentation. Yes, we have some slides here. And then you're going to be able to get all your answers for your questions. Yes, I'm going to be sending you also a recording of this webinar after I process the video and upload it to SpainGuru's YouTube channel. Now, the way it's structured, before the application, during the application, after the approval, we're going to talk about definitions, consulates, BLS offices, immigration status, tourist resident, tax considerations, eligibility for this visa, requirements, paperwork, documentation, deadlines. And then during the application, we're going to look at the timings, the different timeframes for the different milestones, application process, and then after the approval, because I'm sure you're going to get approved. Arrival in Spain, recommended first steps once you arrive in the country, renewal process, long-term residency after 5 years, potentially Spanish citizenship, and common pathways to transitioning to work permits in Spain. Remember that the content of this webinar is for information purposes only and is not legal advice. The requirements listed here are not official. Please check your specific consulate's requirements, not only your consulates, but also BLS offices, and also requirements that many users report on SpainGuru's on SpainGuru's Facebook group, that they were required even they weren't on the official pages. A little bit about SpainGuru first. Our objective is facilitating the relocation process for English-speaking foreigners to Spain since 2014. So more than 10 years in this space. And Bruno Bianchi Sarcone, we have wonderful reviews out there on Trustpilot, 181 reviews, 5-star reviews, and on Google 77 now. So a total of almost 300 reviews, 99% of them 5-star reviews. So you're in very good hands. You can use SpainGuru for free. You can join my weekly newsletter that I send every Monday, where I feature top discussions on SpainGuru's Facebook groups and Reddits. Most watched video of the week. I also share investigation blog posts and news, for example, like today's blog post about the end of the Ley de Memoria Democrática. You can also watch SpainGuru's YouTube channel for free with more than 7,000 subscribers and more than 1,000 videos. Out of them, I think 500 of them are about the non-lucrative visa. So definitely worth watching and worth subscribing. Reading our blog with more than 2,000 articles, and as I said, a huge community with an aggregated total of 150,000 members, where the Spanish non-lucrative visa dedicated group has more than 24,000 members as of today. I highly recommend you joining this group if you haven't done so yet, and also joining the Reddit community. Now, I also released new sections on SpainGuru's website, and I think it's easier if I show you the website here by sharing my screen here. This is the Spanish non-lucrative visa Facebook group, and this is SpainGuru.es, not .com, yes. And here you can see you can join my free webinar here. You can opt out anytime, any webinars, sorry. There are 6 webinars in total, so taxes, non-lucrative visa, etc. Yes, digital nomad visa, moving to Spain. There's also the newsletter that you can join today, and you can opt out anytime, and the Move to Spain checklist here, which is very, very relevant that I talk to you about this today, because here you can start preparing your move to Spain 1 year before your intended move to Spain, 12 months before moving, 3 to 6, 0 to 3, and even after you arrive to Spain, with all the resources, all the videos, all the articles that are related to every single step in this wonderful journey that you're about to start. Yes, for example, here, you start by crafting your vision, learning about taxes, relocation budget, joining the community, and also checking the destinations in Spain, right? If you're still not sure about where to go to live in Spain, what key factors you must consider, and investigation articles that are constantly updated, okay, even in real time, for the cost of living and for real estate, okay, for the top 95% of destinations where expats and foreigners choose to go to live in Spain. All this with many videos, if you prefer videos rather than reading. So definitely checking Spenguru.es makes a lot of sense because it is absolutely free. Definitely a wonderful tool, in my humble opinion. Then you also have, of course, my vetted partners. And at the very least, even before taking the decision to move to Spain, I highly recommend you consulting, not me, if you want, okay, with my recommended lawyers, fine. But if not, with other lawyers, okay, immigration lawyers, at the very least, consult with an expert immigration lawyer 1 hour just to make sure that your plans make sense and they are realistic. Second consultation I highly recommend, and that's why it's in bold letters, is tax advisors. Very important. Spain taxes are complex, they're high, and they can have profound implications in the ways you do things once you move to Spain or even before taking the decision. So those two are at the very least, highly recommended. Then there are other services like financial planners, okay? And if you're going to apply for your visas, especially if you do it yourself, you will need compliant health insurance. You can find on Spenguru.es, MEGA certificates, short translations, apostille services, bank accounts, money transfer services, property rentals, mortgages, and so many more services. But at the very least, immigration and tax experts, highly recommended that you engage with those two, even before taking the decision to move to Spain. And of course, I have personally vetted all those. I have recommended most of them for several years. They have stellar reviews. You are in very good hands. I only get good reviews about my recommended partners. If I get 1 or 2 bad reviews, I take them off my page. So it's very, very important that you go with recommended partners who know what they're doing, okay? And they are experts in the specific procedures, like in this case, non-lucrative visa. And from the countries where you're moving from, for example, US and UK, they have specifics on terms of taxes and so much more. So yes, definitely consider that. Now, let's go deep into the non-lucrative visa. What is this visa? It is for non-EU citizens who can financially support themselves and who don't need to work in Spain. It is defined by 2 laws. The main law, which is higher in hierarchy, it is the Ley Orgánica 4 2000, okay? That hasn't changed in many, many years. Then there is a bylaw, which is lower in hierarchy, that is the Reglamento de Extranjería, or the regulation of the main law, that has changed and took effect starting on May 20th, 2025, okay? This is a lower hierarchy regulation of the main immigration law. And this has very deep implications in many things, like minimum stay requirements for the visa renewal. We're going to talk about that later on. Now, if you're applying from any of these 4 countries, USA, UK, Canada, and Australia, on Spenguru, you can find dedicated pages for each of the Spanish consulates on those countries. And why is it so interesting? Because you can find the direct links to the official websites for the non-lucrative visa. But not only that, you will find first-hand experiences, okay, from people like you who have just applied on those specific consulates, okay, telling their first-hand experiences, the surprises that they got, the blocks, how they overcame them, okay, everything, okay? So it is very, very important because every consulate is different, especially the ones in the US. Every consulate is its own kingdom or planet. They have different, let's say, interpretations of the rules. So it's very, very important that you also become an expert, not only in the visa in general, but also about your specific consulates, right? How do you find these pages? Simple. You go to Spenguru, you go to Guides and Blogs, Visa Guide, Spain, Non-Lucrative Visa Guide, Non-Lucrative Visa Consulate. You go to your country, you go to your specific consulate, and then you will find the page. It's very, very simple. Now, many of the consulates outsource the processing of many visas. Could be Schengen visas, student visas, etc. It is very important that you find out whether your consulate is processing the non-lucrative visa. For example, in the US, Boston and New York City, they don't use BLS offices. It's very important. But Miami, Houston, Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles, they do, right? So when you're going to be dealing with someone, it's going to be with the BLS office if the consulate has outsourced this visa type, okay? But if it didn't, then you're going to deal directly with the consulate, right? Now, coming back to which consulate is your consulate. Well, you cannot apply from any consulate anywhere in the world. You have to be legally resident within the jurisdiction that is served by that specific Spanish consulate. For example, if you live in Atlanta, Georgia, in the USA, that falls within the jurisdiction of Miami. Miami uses BLS, so you're going to have to be dealing with BLS office in Miami. That's for an example. In the UK, all the consulates use BLS, all right? So each one of them has a BLS office in those cities, and you're going to have to apply via BLS, okay? Who is BLS? BLS is an Indian company, okay, who is in the Indian Stock Exchange. You can actually invest in that company. As you can see, the price is going up. I talked to you about this today because here you can start preparing your move to Spain 1 year before your intended move to Spain, 12 months before moving, 3 to 6, 0 to 3, and even after you arrive to Spain, with all the resources, all the videos, all the articles that are related to every single step in this wonderful journey that you're about to start. Yes, for example, here you start by crafting your vision, learning about taxes, relocation budget, joining the community, and also checking the destinations in Spain, right? If you're still not sure about where to go to live in Spain, this is not financial advice, but it's a huge company. It's present in 66 countries. They not only work with Spain, but they also do the processes, the procedures of several other countries. Okay, and they're very, operations oriented. What they do is they receive the file as the consulate wants to receive it. Okay, so they put everything in order, make sure that all the papers are there, nothing is missing, so that the consulate receives a very, very standardized and harmonized package, so it's easier for them to process. Yes. So that's what BLS does. They are not official, let's say, they're not official people who will, accept or deny your visa. It's going to be the consulate, right? Another thing to consider is the existence of the Schengen area. We're going to talk about that later on. We're going to mention it very often. It is a group of 29 European countries, from which 25 are from the European Union, but also 4 countries in Europe who are not from the European Union. Doesn't matter, because what it matters is that this group of countries, you will have immigration control in its borders, but it is internally borderless. That means if you travel from France to Spain, you will not find an immigration control. But if you travel from the USA to any country within this area, you will find an immigration control. And recently, they started rolling up a new immigration system control. It not only work with Spain, but they also do the processes, the procedures of several other countries. Okay, and they're very called EES, entry-exit system, that will replace the typical booth with the called immigration officer stamping your passport. They will read your face, scan your fingerprints and everything, and that will count as a stamp, right? Now, let's continue with visa requirements for Spain. Any of these citizens of these 4 countries, USA, Canada, Australia, and UK, can enter the Schengen area without the necessity of a Schengen visa for tourist purposes, right? But there is a time limit. You can only stay maximum 90 days in a rolling 180-day period, right? After that 90 days limit, you have to get out of Schengen area, wait 90 days, and then you can come back 90 days, okay? So this is, you call also the Schengen shuffle, okay? When you go up in and out without passing those 90 days, okay? Now, if you want to stay more than 90 days in any of the Schengen member countries, including Spain, you will need to obtain a residency, okay? In Spain, residencies that are for more than 90 days and less than 5 years are technically called temporary residencies. After 5 years, it is technically called long-term residency, also known as permanent residency, right? So the non-lucrative visa is one of the temporary residencies. Yes. Now, what is the difference between visa and residency? The visa, you obtain it as a on your passport at a Spanish consulate abroad. It will be sticked on one of the pages of your passport and will grant you the right to obtain a residency linked to that visa once you are in Spain. Therefore, when you fly to Spain, you're officially required to obtain a residency card, okay, which will be a non-lucrative residency, which will be valid for the remaining part of a year. Then you will renew it for 2 more years and renew it for 2 more years. And potentially after, you will go to the long-term residency, right? But once you obtain your residency, the visa expires, okay? It's no longer valid, okay? It's an image on your passport, right? That is the difference between the visa and the residency. Now, remember what we said, that the non-lucrative visa is for non-EU citizens, right? So if you are an European citizen, an European Union citizen, or any of those 4 associate countries, or you are a spouse of a European citizen, or those of associate countries, then there is an easier pathway to stay in Spain, right? And the non-lucrative visa is not for you. It is much easier if you pretend to come to Spain without working, for example. You will just obtain okay, as a European Union passport holder, if you have the possibility to obtain this kind of passport, many people do, and are like, oh, should I go with non-lucrative visa, or potentially I could get the Irish passport, or I could get the Italian passport. Potentially it is a better pathway to obtain the EU passport, because it is much easier to come to live to Spain. You have the right to reside in Spain as long as you register, okay? And if you are the spouse of one EU passport holder, you can piggyback with the European family member card, okay? And they will give you a work permit for 5 years. You don't have to do renewals in between. If you are not going to work, then you only have to show 7,200 euros. It varies by region, but this is not the 28,800 euros. Okay, so it is a much better, much simpler way to come to live to Spain. Okay, otherwise, if you're a non-EU passport holder, the non-lucrative visa can be an option for you. Let's talk about taxes. Okay, now we're at residency, right? But once you obtain your residency, the visa expires. Okay, it's no longer valid. Okay, it's an image on your passport. Right? That is the difference between a little bit in the general considerations. Okay, then we're going to go much deeper into the process of the non-lucrative visa. But these are very important things, I think, that have very strong impact on this. Tax residency in Spain, huge and important concept. You become a tax resident in Spain and therefore must pay tax on your global income and potentially taxes on the net value of your assets abroad and inside Spain, if any of these three conditions apply. The most common, if you spend over 183 days physically in Spain within a calendar year or tax year that starts in January 1st and goes until December 31st. Now, do not confuse with the immigration year. Immigration year is a natural year. If you arrive on July 2nd, the immigration year for you will be from July 2nd to July 2nd, okay? But the tax year had already started on January 1st. And we'll get back to zero the next January 1st. So therefore, those 2 years, tax year and immigration year, may or not overlap, okay? And you can play with it. The second condition is, and something else I should mention about the physical presence in Spain is that it doesn't matter your immigration status. If you come to Spain for 15 days as a tourist, those days count towards your count of days for the tax residency in Spain. Therefore, if you arrive to Spain and scouting trip at the beginning of the year, you spend in Spain 2 months, for example, okay, out of the 90 days you have, then you go back to your country, you get your visa, you move to Spain later on, thinking that you are only going to be 182 days, you should also add those 20 days that you had spent as a tourist earlier in the year, okay? And that will make you a tax resident, so be careful with that. Second condition is, if your main economic activity or primary income source is in Spain, or the third one is if your family lives in Spain. Okay, any of these conditions, tax authorities could consider you a tax resident in Spain and therefore liable for taxes on your worldwide income. Other taxes, well, we mentioned income tax, deadline June 30th with progressive tax rates ranging from 19% to 47% with regional variations. Form 720, once you become a tax resident in Spain, you need to disclose the existence of assets abroad, okay? Properties, bank accounts, cryptocurrencies, as long as the categories that group those type of assets go over 50,000 euros, and of course for real estate, this is very easy to surpass. You will have to declare this. You don't have to pay taxes, but you need to declare the existence via this form to Spanish tax authorities, and they want to know it just to deduct whether you're potentially also having income in those countries, okay, and also for the regional wealth tax and for the national solidarity tax. Now that we mentioned it, every region has a different wealth tax. This is a tax that is calculated over the net value of your assets. Favorable regions, there are 17 regions in Spain, are Madrid, Andalusia. They basically don't have wealth tax. There's also Extremadura and Cantabria, okay? And then it will depend on the region, the thresholds for starting or to be liable for this tax, depending on the regions, starts at 500,000 euros onwards. For example, Catalonia is 500,000 euros of net wealth, okay, or net worth. Valencia, it was 500,000, and now they will raise it to 1 million euros, okay? Now, this is, as you can see, regional. It will depend where you move to Spain, it will kick in or not. But the national solidarity tax is nationwide. It doesn't matter where you live in Spain, but the threshold is much higher, starting at 3 million euros, and whatever you have paid as a wealth tax will also be credited towards the payment of the national solidarity tax, okay? Remember that Spain has many double taxation agreements, including those for countries, USA, UK, Canada, Australia, and many more, that will avoid the taxpayers to be paying taxes on the same things. That doesn't matter that you will pay less taxes. You will just not pay double, okay, on the same thing twice, okay? But you will potentially be paying taxes where you're a tax resident. And if you become a tax resident in Spain, taxes tend to be higher than in any of those other 4 countries. Okay. Now, remember that I'm not a tax advisor, and your specific circumstances have a very deep influence on the amount of taxes that you will be paying. Therefore, as I said, highly recommended to consult with a tax advisor, okay, that you can find also on SpainGuru.es. Now, if you want to become more knowledgeable, go deeper into taxes, you can also join my free Spanish taxes webinar that you can also watch the recording after you have registered, okay? And there's also a Q&A session at the end. Now, let's go with the non-lucrative visa documentation. This is a summary and it's not official, okay? But let's talk about the most important things. First, the consulate will ask you for an address in Spain. Depending on the consulate, they will want to know just the province where you're moving, okay, with no more questions asked. And some consulates are a bit crazy and they have a very strict interpretation of this regulation, and they will ask you for a rental contract, okay, or property deeds, right? So some of those consulates, for example, Houston, Boston, I know for sure that it will require at least a 3-month lease. Okay. Now, I have a video with Ainhoa Manero, expert immigration lawyer from Stern Abogados, and there you can see the answers to 43 non-lucrative visa frequently asked questions. These are 20 minutes each video. I highly recommend you watching those videos from the beginning till the end, because these are very important questions. These are very updated questions, and she's an immigration lawyer with extensive experience in this visa. And one of the things that she does is addressing about this interpretation of some consulates asking you for a lease. And she says that her clients will never get a lease before getting their visas approved, okay? Because it is absolutely outrageous that the consulates ask for a lease even before you getting the security of having the visa granted. It makes no sense. It puts you in a situation of risk, and it makes absolutely no sense. And it's, something that some consulates do and some other don't. So it doesn't make any sense. And what she does is she takes some screenshots from Idealista, web process of the non-lucrative visa. But these are very important things, I think, that have very strong impact on this. Tax residency in Spain, huge and important concept. You become a tax resident in Spain and therefore must pay tax on your global income and potentially taxes on the net value of your assets abroad and inside Spain if any of these 3 conditions apply. The most common, if you spend over 183 days physically in Spain within a calendar year or tax year that starts in January 1st and goes until December 31st. Now, do not confuse with the immigration year. Immigration year is a natural year. If you arrive on July 2nd, portal in Spain, like Zillow in the US, okay? And she will say like, okay, her client will be searching for this type of rentals once arriving in Spain, etc. And that's it. But a visa cannot be denied because you didn't show a rental contract, okay? That's her own, let's say, her own words. This is what she's conveying. Please watch the video because I'm not an immigration lawyer. This is not legal advice. And of course, many people will try not to add any friction to their processes, and they will do rentals, for example, 3 months on Airbnb, then they will reduce to less. We will see that someone did that in DC, or some people will cancel them all the way. Well, this is bad for the landlord who already blocked the calendar for 3 months, okay? But yes, some people try to reduce, let's say, mitigate the risk of doing rentals, but just that you know that this point is a bit nuanced. Now, then you will have to prove that you are a legal resident within the jurisdiction that your consulate serves, okay? This is what we said. If you live in Atlanta, Georgia, your consulate is Miami, and then therefore Miami BLS. If you live in Southern California, your consulate will be Los Angeles, right? And you will have to prove that, okay, that you live within that jurisdiction. If you live close to Manchester, you cannot choose London, okay? Now, if you're a second passport holder, if you are a dual citizen, for example, you have the passport of Colombia, let's say, potentially you could apply from a consulate in Colombia, okay? That is also a possibility, okay? Now, next one, prove sufficient financial means to support yourself, and if you're bringing independence, of course, the threshold goes up without working. Have comprehensive health insurance from a company authorized to operate in Spain, or if you're a UK retiree, potentially you could use the S1 form that will grant you access to the Spanish public system, therefore avoiding the requirement of providing a private health insurance, okay? This is an exception, let's say. Otherwise, if you are not a UK retiree, you will need a private health insurance. Clean criminal background check. medical certificate, which is different than the health insurance, is another story. We're going to talk about all this for each one of them. Then if you are coming with a spouse, which is a dependent, okay, you will need to provide a new marriage certificate, a new copy, official copy of the marriage certificate. Dependent children, new birth certificates. So if you're not coming with spouse or children, those certificates are not needed. Yes, if you're coming by yourself, you don't need a marriage certificate or birth certificate. And also, many consulates will ask you to promise that you will not engage in any work or professional activities in Spain. Okay, then potentially asking for a letter of intent. Some consulates have this as a requirement. There's a letter of intent template on Spainguru.es that you can use, and you can change it, okay, for your specific situation. And also some people choose to add letter of intents because their financial situations is a bit complex, let's say. It's not easy to understand just by showing the papers. So they explain it and they make it easier and clearer for the people analyzing their file via the letter of intent. Then there are consulates that, if you're bringing children, will ask for school enrollment of your children and other things that we mentioned, like rental contracts, etc. And many consulates, and especially BLS offices, will ask you for a photography with specific measurements. You will all have to pay fees. So each main applicant, dependents, each one of them will have to pay the fees, okay, fill the forms, etc., right? So everyone has to have a file. As I mentioned here, there is the QR code for watching these interviews, 2 videos, 20 minutes each. Definitely worth your time, in my humble opinion. And yes, let's continue and go deeper into each one of those requirements. Let's talk first about the financial requirements for 2025, okay? You have to show proof that you have sufficient funds or access to funds. How much money do you need to show? The main applicant is 400% of the IPREM index of 2025, and each dependent, that includes the spouse, is 100% of this index. So this translated into euros is 28,800 euros for the main applicant, 7,200 euros for each dependent. Therefore, a couple, if you see the second row on the table on the right, is 36,000 euros that you need to prove, okay? So this is for 1 year, right? Because the initial application is for 1 year. But when you do the renewals will be for 2 years. And this is the catch, okay? Think that for the renewals, you will need to show, depending on the province, okay, you will need to show double this amount, okay, but for a period of 2 years. Therefore, the type of funds that you have, namely, if you have money in the bank, sitting in the bank versus passive recurrent income, counts differently, right? We're going to talk about that later on, but have it in mind, right? So the type of fundings that you can provide is savings, as we said, lump sum in a bank, and or passive income. So you can combine any of those. It could be pension withdrawals, rental income, dividends, even funds available by credit card, as long as they are readily available without any penalties, okay? And you need to prove that, yes? But yeah, also rental income has an asterisk there because some consulates and some provinces for the renewals are a bit untrustful of rental income because they consider it to be not a safe income because the tenant can stop paying you, right? So sometimes there could be some friction if you present this rental income or if it is a high percentage of the total funding that you are presenting. How do you prove this funding? Via bank statements and documentation from your bank wherever you have the money. It could be US, UK, Canada, etc., or even abroad, right? Some consulates will also ask for tax returns. I have added a couple of slides at the end. Okay, we're going to talk about that. And as we said, depending on the province where you are renewing, they will ask you to show double the amount in a 2-year period, okay? And we're going to have a case scenario, so we do the calculation together so nothing falls into the cracks in this webinar. We mentioned people from Spainguru's Non-Lucrative Visa Facebook group, people asking like, how much funding do they ask you for renewal in Valencia, for example? Well, this lawyer said, for example, in Valencia province, not the region, Valencia province, you only need 1 year of funds to renew for years 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. But in Alicante, the other province of the Valencia region, in south of Valencia city, is 2 years, okay? And people reported in Almeria, you only need 1. People talking about Madrid. As I mentioned here, there is the QR code for watching these interviews, 2 videos, 20 minutes each. Definitely worth your time, in my humble opinion. And yes, let's continue and go deeper into each one of those requirements. Let's talk first about the financial requirements for 2025, okay? You have to show that you only need one. People about in Galicia, in La Coruña, they talk about one. And there was a recent crazy case that they renewed for 4 years, but it seemed to have been a mistake. Okay, I have a video with Ainhoa where she talks about this resolution. Had to be something exceptional. We shouldn't count on it, but it has happened, and I bring it to your attention, right? So depending where you are going to be renewing, you're going to need to prove more or less funds for the renewal. We mentioned that the thresholds for the fundings are calculated via using an index called IPREM, okay? The IPREM index is an index that is published every time that there are new national budget, okay? The problem is that this government doesn't get political agreement with other parties to get a new budget at the beginning of the year for the last 3 years. Therefore, the IPREM index has been frozen since 2023. It could happen at the beginning of next year. It is unlikely, but it could happen that the government gets agreement with other parties to publish a new national budget, and they will take or use this opportunity to update the IPREM index. And as you can see there in the yearly progression since 2004, it has only gone up. If that happens, then the financial thresholds for the initial application, but also for the renewals, will go up. So imagine that you apply in 2025, and this is the financial threshold, but once after 1 year in Spain, you need to renew, and the IPREM has changed. For example, here's an example. If it goes to 650 euros per month, okay, then the main applicant will go to 31,200 euros, and each dependent 2,800 euros, okay? So a little bit higher, right? So it's something that you need to budget accordingly. There is let's say, a risk that the IPREM goes up during those 5 years in which you're going to be applying and renewing. Yes, so account for that. Also, and this has caused a lot of noise, let's say, in the community, which is that recent crazy case that they renewed for 4 years, but it seemed to have been a mistake. Okay, I have a video with Ainhoa where she talks about this resolution. Had to be something exceptional. We shouldn't count on it, but it has happened, and I bring it after May 20th, 2025. Like the regulation. Okay, the regulation after didn't mention anything about this, but it seems that some consulates talked to among together. They sat down in a table and said, we're gonna add more documentation in order to reduce fraud. Okay, but this is not in the law. Okay, this is something that they said, okay, let's do it. Okay, but not every consulate, right? Now, many of them, and all of them in the USA, and it seems that all of them in the UK, are asking for more certificates from your banks when you are proving your financial situation, right? And you will have to show your bank statements that show the full bank name and address, okay, of that bank, the full account identification. Many people, for privacy reasons or whatever, they don't want to disclose it, they don't put the full bank account. They put like X's or whatever, spaces. No, it has to be the full bank account, has to be your full name there, has to appear the opening date, potentially the closing date if you have closed it, okay, so that everything matches. You're applying as, and this is your name, this is your bank account, and you can clearly match the bank account with your name, okay. Then also controversial stuff, showing the balance as of December 31st of the previous year, okay? So if you're applying 2025, you need to show the balance of the specific bank account as of December 31st of 2024, right? And the average balance for the previous year, the average monthly balance, yes? So these are certificates that are not very commonly provided by banks in the US, UK, etc. And I'm going to show you what I have in my personal bank. This is BBVA. This is one of the banks that I use. And you can see I have on my phone, I have ordered a certificate, and they send me this digital copy. This is not something that I went to the office and gave me a paper with a wet ink stamp. No, this is the digital copy. And even the digital copy has a wet ink stamp, right? And this is why the authorities and the legislators in Spain love to see a wet ink stamp, okay, and a certificate, which digital banks and generally banks in the US or anywhere else in the world are no longer issuing, okay? And you will find this block. So I have a video where I ask Ainhoa Manero, like, what do you do with your clients when you face these problems? And what she says is like, they cannot deny you a visa because of not being able to show a bank statement with wet ink, okay? As long as you prove and credit and you prove that you are doing what it is in your hands, possibly, okay? What it is possible, humanly possible to do, okay, to provide the consulate with information that they require, right? So for example, if your bank is not showing you the monthly balance of the previous year, you will have a Google Sheet or Excel where you calculate by hand, yes, and you will make it look official by, signing it and signing it by a notary public, right, and getting some stamps and everything and showing that this is true, okay, or maybe the bank states that these calculations are true, etc., and providing these kind of alternatives to what the regulations say. So of course, wherever you are probably applying for this visa and the type of banks that you have, every case will be different. But basically, she says that there are ways to overcome this, and so far I haven't seen in the groups people who are saying like, I got denied because I couldn't supply this information. Okay. Another question that I get a lot is, can I work remotely for non-Spanish companies? Okay, this is a question that is asked a lot, and it creates a lot of friction, let's say, in the communities, because a lot of people are very, very strict, and they say like, this is a non-lucrative visa, you cannot work, period. Okay, which is not entirely true. It's not entirely true, because this visa is an old type of visa, an old type of residence, and when they approved it, okay, the Spanish authorities, there was no such thing like remote work. Okay, what they wanted, and the spirit of this visa and residence, is that you don't work in Spain for Spanish companies, right? But if you're working remotely for other companies outside of Spain, then it is a gray area. However, if, and this is again a strict interpretation of the consulates, okay, if there is the slightest doubt that you are working or you have plans to work once you have the visa remotely, okay, in Spain, you will be straightly denied, like ipso facto. Okay, this is it. Okay, but a lot of people get the visa, okay, via having savings, via having passive income, etc., and either before and or after work remotely for non-Spanish companies, and everything is fine. And in fact, there is a Supreme Court decision that actually sustains this, okay, that says that you can perfectly work remotely for non-Spanish companies under a non-lucrative residency. A Supreme Court decision, okay? So it is highly defensible. I never heard that anyone could not renew their non-lucrative visas as long as they comply with the initial requirements of savings, passive income, etc. You cannot use active income to apply or to renew. But this is the situation. And of course, I'm not recommending you to tell you to do this, okay? There is the digital nomad visa now as of 2023 that you can use for remote work, and it might be a better option for you, okay? But this is the gray area, okay? This is the gray area, and it happens, okay? I know a lot of people, and also you can go on YouTube, and very famous YouTubers out there have come with a non-lucrative residence and were working. They were working in front of you, okay? And nothing happened. They were just paying taxes on their global income, right? And tax authorities were not connected to immigration authorities, right? And they're renewed, complying with the requirements. And of course, when they applied at the consulates, they never said anything like this, right? But there are also situations that are officially recognized by certain consulates. As we said, consulates can be extremely different, and they have very different interpretations. And I'm going to mention Edinburgh in the UK, that's clearly states that you can work in the UK, depending on the nature of your work, okay, and still get your non-lucrative residency. And there is a specific case of someone who posted on Spain Group's community saying that they got their visa as a family, and the husband flies every 15 days to work at an oil platform in the Northern Sea, and they got the non-lucrative residency. Also, I know that my immigration partners, lawyers, they have cases of people who have certain jobs, like pilots, for example, people who are pilots in the US, and they go every month or 2 months and they do a long haul flight, and they still got the non-lucrative residency in Spain, okay, and they're still working in the US as pilots, right? So if you are in any of these situations, definitely go with expert immigration lawyers who know exactly their deal with these situations. And of course, you can find them on spainguru.es. Right? As you can see, there's a screenshot in Edinburgh Consulate that shows the official website talking about the possibility of being working, as long as the type of work is of a specific nature. Okay, in this case was a Northern Sea oil rig. Now let's talk about private health insurance requirements. This is an important one. The health insurance that you need to provide must come from a company who is authorized to operate in Spain and has to have certain conditions. No co-payments. Some consulates also say no reimbursements. This is a little bit of a gray area, depending where you're applying from. No waiting periods. You need to be covered from moment zero. Full coverage with nuances here. Okay, I'm going to talk about that. And normally, 99% of cases, you will have to do a yearly payment in advance to pay the full year. Okay, because most companies will require you to pay for the full year in order to issue the certificate of coverage that states that you will be covered for the entire period of the initial visa, which is 12 months. And that certificate of coverage must be in Spanish and must have a specific wording. Okay. Let's talk about the frequently asked questions. Are my medicines cost covered? When you have a private health insurance in Spain, medicine costs, you will have to pay retail price. What should the health insurance start date be? There's not a clear answer to this question, but most people will tell you that when you apply for the visa, you will have to guesstimate when the visa will be starting, and you will have to choose to start the health insurance in the same month, the first day of the month in which your visa is starting. For example, if your visa starts on the 15th of July, you will start your health insurance policy on July 1st. Okay. Now, if you use my recommended exclusive agent, he will tell you exactly when to start it. Okay. And has the possibility to extend it in the future if things get delayed, which is something that not many people do. Now, here are there health insurance for older than 75 years of age? Yes. Okay. There are. They're expensive. Okay. And not every company has them. As far as I know, there's only 2 companies who have them, which is DKV and Adeslas. Okay. DKV is expensive, very good reviews, very good company. Adeslas also very good company, but it's more value for money. Okay, and if you want to go for Adeslas, you can get a free quote on SpainGlue.es. Now, what if I have pre-existing conditions? This is circling back to the condition of full coverage. There are nuances, right? So it will depend what type of pre-existing conditions you have, how serious they are. If you have had cancer diagnosis within the previous 5 years, it's going to be very, very tough to even obtain a company who is ready to cover you for the non-lucrative visa, first of all. There are other serious pre-existing conditions, okay? But always talk to an exclusive agent or broker who can tell you, right? Now, there are pre-existing conditions that are not as serious. For example, high blood pressure. What will happen is you have to, okay, legally disclose all these pre-existing conditions, and the companies will exclude those conditions from the coverage, but will still be able to issue the certificate of coverage in Spanish that is necessary to get approved for the non-lucrative visa. However, if you have a medical problem related to those conditions, you will not be covered. You will have to pay all the treatment out of your pocket, and obviously also the medicines, okay? Now, many people go to Spain this way, and after 1 year, okay, you will have the option to pay into the Spanish public system, which has the advantage that it will cover you for all the pre-existing conditions treatment. You will still have to pay retail price for the medicines, but you will be covered for the treatments. Now, this is a regional scheme, okay, that is based on the social security of each of the regions. But generally, if you are younger than 65 years of age, you will have to pay 60 euros per month. Or if you're older than 65, it's 157 euros per month. This is the case of Valencia, for example. Can I use my current health insurance from the UK and USA? Short answer is, if it complies with the conditions, yes. But the long answer is, I highly don't recommend it because you will find many problems, many blocks on the way, and potentially denial. Potentially, I'm saying, depending how bad of a day had the official review in your case. Okay, because there's many problems in using health insurance from those countries, because it could be considered to be a tourist travel insurance that is not allowed. It could have co-payment or reimbursement clauses that could add friction to the approval. It could have that the certificate of coverage is not in Spanish. You will have to sworn translate it, and it will cost you 40 euros per page. And those things have to have also their own specific wording. Okay, so all these things can add friction. And in my opinion, humble opinion again, it doesn't make any sense, because the health insurances packages that you can obtain from Spanish companies are very affordable compared to what you're used to paying. Okay, so definitely, in my humble opinion, you should go with those. Okay, can I apply with a UK S1 form if I'm a UK retiree? Yes, as we said before, yes. Instead of a private health insurance, you can use it. Okay, you start the process in the UK, and you do a pre-registration. You obtain your visa, and then you move to Spain and you finish the registration. Problem with this: you will not get effective access to a doctor in the Spanish public system after several weeks. Some people even talked about months, okay? So what's going to happen in between? it is recommended to have some sort of coverage, okay? Doesn't have to be an NLV compliant one, okay? It can be something with co-payments, it could be something smaller, whatever, okay? But definitely get covered with something for the interim in which you will really have access to doctors in Spain, okay? Because it can take time, depending where you move. Do I need a Spanish bank account to hire these companies? No, you don't, okay? But if you happen to have one, potentially, instead of paying a full year in advance, some companies I've heard that you could pay on a monthly basis and still you would get your certificate of coverage in Spanish for the full year, okay? But it is absolutely not common that happens. Can I pay on a monthly basis? I just said that. Can there be reimbursements? It is a bit of a gray area. For example, Houston says no, okay? And as I said, depending on the mood of the person reviewing your case, it could be a problem, reimbursement. Will I get a refund if I'm denied? Now, that depends solely on the type of policy that you sign. And the first of all, before signing any contract, you need to read everything. And specifically to answer this question, read the cancellation clause. The cancellation clause could be a very favorable one. It could be a very bad one. Very bad one is there's no refund, zero. A better one could be there is a refund only if the visa is denied before 31st of the previous year. Okay. So if you're applying 2025, you need to show the balance of the specific bank account as of December 31st of 2024, right? And the average balance for the previous year, the average monthly balance. Yes. So these are certificates that are not very commonly provided by banks in the US, UK, etc. And I'm going to show you what I have in my personal bank. This is BBVA. This is one of the banks that I use. And you can see I have on my phone, I have ordered a certificate and they send me this digital copy. This is not something that I went to the office and gave me a paper with a wet ink stamp. No, this is the digital copy. And even the digital copy has a wet ink stamp, right? And this is why the authorities and the legislators in Spain love to see a wet ink stamp, okay, and a certificate, which digital banks and generally banks in the US or anywhere else in the world are no longer issuing, okay? And you will find this blog. So I have a video where I ask Ainhoa Manero, like, what do you do with your clients when you face these problems? And what she says is like, they cannot deny you a visa because of not being able to show a bank statement with wet ink, okay? As long as you prove and credit and you prove that's because of the health insurance, but only because of the health insurance. If it was denied because of another reason, no, there's no refund. Another one is only we will give you back everything except the taxes, okay? Or we will give you everything without questions asked, okay? As long as you provide as a letter from the consulate that you have been officially denied. This is the case of the exclusive agent that I'm recommending on SpainGroup.es. It gives you this type of clause, okay? But always read before you're signing. I'm amazed sometimes at people who go to, Spain Guru's non-lucrative visa groups and say like, will I get a refund if I get denied? And they don't even say which company, what is the cancellation clause that they signed or anything. Okay, they go to social media to ask this, which is mind-boggling to me because they have signed a contract which has usually 40 pages. You need to read it, and if you have any questions, any doubts, that's why it's better to go with a broker, with an exclusive agent, because there's no added cost into it, and you have a person who understands perfectly what you need to know. If it was denied because of another reason, no, there's no refund. Another one is only we will give you back everything except the tax. Just a quick moment. Over 60% of you watching right now aren't subscribed. That's a lot of people getting value without hitting that button. 60%. If my videos have helped you understand Spain's immigration process, visas, or life here, even just once, please subscribe now. I'm working hard to reach 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2025, and your click truly makes a difference. Thanks so much. Now, let's keep going. Okay, so yeah, that's my take on that. And sorry, before we said, what are the top companies in Spain? So first, you have Adeslas, Asisa, KV, ASA, Salus, Caser, Sanitas, AXA, Mafre. Probably sounds like a tongue twister to you, all these names. But yeah, definitely Adeslas is the biggest one with 30% of the market. I think it was 25% of Spaniards have private coverage as well. Okay, I personally have private and I am autonomous as well. I pay taxes and social security here, so I have full access to public healthcare system. And the best is to combine both. If you have the money, and as I said, it is much more affordable than in the US. Okay, so the best of both worlds is to have the speed of the private sector, okay, and direct access to specialists, and the full treatment coverage from the public sector. Okay. and the subsidies on the medicines. Those are the biggest, let's say, things, advantage of those. Okay, two types of systems. So definitely have those if you can. Okay, not only because some people say like, I'm gonna get private health insurance first, and after the first year I'm gonna go with the convenio especial, and I'm gonna stop paying the private health insurance. I don't think it's the best decision. And second of all, when you renew your visa after the first year, you will not get effective access to your convenio especial for the renewal. So you will always have to renew your private health insurance, at least for the first renewals. Otherwise, you won't make it in time, and you will have a gap in coverage, which is a denial reason for renewal. So be careful with all that. Now, there's been some problems reported by people applying at DC, Washington, DC, and also Manila. And I was talking to a journalist also last week, and she said at other consulates as well that BLS, yes, the outsourced service, is trying to sell you stuff while you are applying for the visas. So they want to sell you like apostille services. And one of the most misleading things that I've seen in this to sell you in Manila is that they want to sell you a travel health insurance. And even the BLS office and consulates say that travel health insurance will not be accepted for your non-lucrative visa application. So be very careful if you buy this travel health insurance because it won't count. Okay, so be careful. It's super misleading about this outsourcing company. I don't really like it. The way I feel it about this, and I went to Mallorca in August and in September, and I rented a car, and I got a full insurance for the car online. And then when I arrived at the car dealership or the car rentals, they told me that insurance was nothing, and they wanted to sell me another insurance. Right, so this is not serious, right? So you need to get an NLV compliant health insurance with all those conditions. Okay, so be careful about this. And the best person, in my humble opinion, I have been recommending him for the last 3 years, is Carlos Blanco, who not only is an exclusive ADESLA's agent, he's also an expert immigration lawyer who understands and knows all the tricks about the non-lucrative visa process. And he has stellar reviews, and he has one huge advantage, which he can extend the health insurance start date according to your plans, or if there are any delays or whatever, he can start it later on so that you don't use months, okay, or pay for months that you are not using, okay? And also you don't get potential problems or gaps at the end, because if you started too early, the consulate, and this has happened, they can tell you like, oh, you started like 3 months before the submission of the papers. So what, you're not going to be covered for the last 3 months of the year. We're going to approve you the visa for it. Therefore, you have a gap. How do you prove that you're going to be covered those last 3 months? Some people supply like certificate from the company saying that they will be automatically renewed. But I know from Ainhoa Manero from Sterna Wells that she had problems with this too. So yeah, the best is to start the visa together with the health insurance, okay, so that the 12 months is covered. And you can see some reviews there. If you go to the Spain Gurus Non-Lucrative Visa group, you can see people who have used Carlos. It is free to ask him and to get a quote, okay, and to contact him via SpainGuru.es, and I'm sure he's gonna be extremely responsive and give you a wonderful deal, because ADESLAS in general is a very good value for money company. Okay, you have very expensive. You have Sanitas, for example, is very expensive. You have the KV, which is also as expensive, but you don't have to really to be compliant with the non-lucrative visa and still have a very serious company that is the most chosen company in Spain. Now, let's talk about the medical certificate, which is very different from the health insurance. Okay, it is also health, but completely different story. This is a one-page document that must be signed by a doctor. Okay, and in this document, it has to have the specific wording that you don't have any infectious disease as per the protocol of 2005. Okay, those are like yellow fever, this type of diseases, right? Now, depending on the country, you will have to do it in one way or another, right? If you're applying in the UK or if you're applying in the US, etc. So in most countries, you will have to print the template that the consulate gives you. Okay, you search medical certificate template, you will have a template. Sometimes the template only comes in English. Sometimes it comes in English and in Spanish, just like there on the slide. And that is the best, because if you get it signed in English and in Spanish, you will avoid having to sworn translate it, saving 40 euros, right? Now, if it only comes in English, you will have sworn translate it to Spanish, yes? And in most countries, except the UK, just by printing it officially with the doctor's letterhead on top, with a signature everywhere, Spanish version, English version, having a stamp of the doctor with the registration number, that will be enough, okay, to make it valid, right? Now, in the UK, the doctor needs to be FCDO registered, and you also have to apostille it, Yes. Of course, you can find recommended private apostille services on Spain. Yes, for the UK and for the US if you need. Okay, but in the US, Canada, Australia, you don't need to apostille the medical certificate when it is signed by any of those doctors. Now, there is a third option, which is using a Spanish doctor. Yes. And also, if you're in the UK and you want to use an online service, I have discount with ZoomDoc as well for UK doctors. Now, if you want to use a Spanish doctor, I can also put you in contact with a Spanish doctor based in Spain. Everything is online. You do a WhatsApp call. Okay. And you will get a certificate which has several advantages. It is in Spanish, doesn't need to be sworn translated, and it doesn't need to be apostilled. Okay, so you save all that money, and it is faster, right? So the thing is that some consulates in the past used to have also hard interpretation, and they said that you need to be physically present in Spain when the certificate was issued. They will check your entry-exit stamps in your passport and check that you were in Spain when the medical certificate was issued. But that by the way, has a 3-month validity period. Okay, and needs to be valid when you see in Manila, is that they want to sell you a travel health insurance. And even the BLS office and consulates say that travel health insurance will not be accepted for your non-lucrative visa application. So be very careful if you buy this travel health insurance because it won't count. Okay, so be careful. It's super misleading about this outsourcing company. I don't really like it. The way I feel it about this, and I went to Mallorca in August and in September, and I rented a car and I got me the papers. Now, many of those consulates stopped having this interpretation, but some still do. Okay, in the UK, for example, none of them have this interpretation anymore as of now, October 22nd, 2025. In the US, there's some interpretations, like for example, San Francisco could be a problem. But in any case, if you need to use a Spanish doctor, you prefer it, okay, for any reasons, like for example, my doctor won't sign the medical certificate template, what can I do? Find another doctor. If you don't find, or you prefer to use a Spanish doctor, contact via Spain. Yes, fill the form, and you mention the consulate where you're applying from, and the doctor will tell you, yes, my consulate, my certificate is accepted in this consulate without questions or anything, or will tell you, no, this consulate, I'm sorry, but you need to be physically present when I issue the consulate, the certificate, etc. Right? So that's another option. Okay. And this is a table that summarizes what I just said. You can watch it again when I send you the recording of the video. That, by the way, if you watch it, always give it a like. It will really, really helps me with the algorithm in YouTube, which is very, very difficult to stand out. Now let's talk about the clean criminal background check. The document that takes usually the longest to obtain. It must be clean during the last 5 years. Okay, so no records during the last 5 years. And if you have records before, it will depend how serious they are. Now in the UK, it's called the ACRO, and usually has a 6 months validity. Usually check it with your consulate. Always needs to be apostilled. Always needs to be sworn translated. The FBI background check in the US always needs federal apostille. Always need to be sworn translated. Okay, usually 6 months validity. Check with your consulate. Now, am I still eligible with records on my background check? Yes, in the last 5 years, you need to have it clean. Now, if you have a previous record, okay, they can go back in decades and check out the records that you have. Now, if you had like criminal records like conviction time, blood crimes, fraud, a lot of different things that are very, very serious, you could be potentially denied, right? In these situations, it's good to go with expert immigration help. You could be up so that you expunge those records before you apply for the visa, or that the lawyer works with you, okay? So the lawyers would compare your fault or your criminal record with the Spanish version and will say like, oh, if in Spain this should have expired, also in USA or in the UK should have also expired, and they will make a case and build it and convince the consulate that it should not be taken into account, right? This is the situation, right? Always go with expert help if you're in this situation, right? Checking someone says, would a traffic violation count against in that? Usually, if it was a long time ago, it shouldn't, okay? There's no legal advice, okay? The official reviewing your case will take this into a case-by-case situation. But usually, driving under the influence, smoking pot outside of university 20 years ago or 30 years ago, traffic violations, depending if you, I don't know, if you ran over several people, there were dead people, etc. I have no idea really where the limit is. But if it's something small, a misdemeanor, okay, usually it is not a problem as long as if it was 5 years or longer ago. Am I still eligible with a no live trace in the ACRO? Yes, you are still eligible, but the consulate will want an extra document that explains what type of record is underlying that no live trace. You want to know exactly what was the record there. Can I expedite the background check federal apostille in the US? No longer after COVID, but you can use private apostille services that can get you the federal apostille in as short as 10 days. You can find that service on spenguru.es. Can I notarize? Because otherwise, normally it takes 5 to 7 weeks. Okay, it only costs $20. It's very cheap, the federal background check apostille, but it takes 5-7 weeks. Maybe you don't want to help, so that you expunge those records before you apply for the visa, or that the lawyer works with you. Okay, so the lawyers would compare. You want to rush a little bit more. Can I notarize the background check and use the state apostille instead? No, you shouldn't do it. Straight denial. Where can I have my fingerprints taken? USPS office or approved channelers from the FBI. What if my fingerprints are illegible? Try to use the private approved channelers from the FBI, which tend to have better scanners. Okay, I have articles on that if you need recommendations. Now, these are some screenshots just to give you a little bit of a feel. Depending on the country, there's variations about the criminal background check and how long it takes. Now, the ACRO, for example, it's been like so crazy. It's been like a roller coaster. Sometimes it took nothing. Sometimes it took weeks, even months. Sometimes it was hacked by outsiders. But now, apparently, if you pay an extra, you will be taking only 2 days with fast track. But normally it would take 2 to 6 weeks. Okay, and now it costs quite some money to order it. It used to be much cheaper or even free. Now Canada is going much faster than before to get the criminal check from Canada, and the apostille is also going much faster. It used to take months. People had to send the documents from Canada to Spanish Embassy of Canada in Madrid via a friend, and to get the apostille was faster than going through global affairs in Canada. That is finished, and now Canada is going full speed into their apostille services. So great news. Proof of not working. Okay, a lot of people are applying to retire in Spain. This is why normally this is called a retirement visa, but you don't have to. You can be in your 20s and still comply with the requirements. So you are in working age. Okay, it's a blurry term that consulates use, being on working age. I don't know what that means exactly, but if you are young enough, they will scrutiny. You will face more scrutiny in this aspect. Okay, but if you are a retiree and you show proof of the receipt of a pension, perfect. You're a straightforward case. Okay, you don't need to prove that you're not going to be working. Okay, you're a pensionist. That's it. But state apostille instead. No, you shouldn't do it. Straight denial. Where can I have my fingerprints taken? USPS office or approved channelers from the FBI. What if my fingerprints are illegible? Many people say, I want to work until the very last minute. Can I do that? Right. So depends who you ask. Many people, they will tell you one thing of another. And also some consulates are much stricter than others. Okay. In the UK, they seem to be stricter, right, than in the US. But all the cases happen. If you're in this situation, again, if you are not a straightforward case, yes, use a lawyer. Okay, a lawyer that can defend you in case you get a denial or some friction, or you get asked for extra documents. Okay, because the lawyer will know the ins and outs of this situation, right? Not every lawyer, but people who do this every day, right? Now, in the UK, the best that you can show to prove that you are retired is a P45 form. In the US, resignation letter, termination letter from your employer, both translated and notarized. If you're freelancers in the US, notarized affidavit promising not to work. And in the UK, they're quite strict. A letter from HMRC and accountant stating having ceased trading and deregistered for self-employment. Should I quit before I get the visa? Now, I know Manero from Stern Abogados will tell you straight no, you don't have to quit. Okay, why would you quit if you don't know if you get your visa, right? But of course, you will receive a letter from the consulate saying like, well, why haven't you retired yet? Yes. So as an individual, you don't know where to be, no? Exactly. So it is a nuanced question and answer. Is renting out a property considered a job? If you have 1 or 2 properties and you rent them long-term, no. But if you have 30 properties and you rent them on an Airbnb, it is a business, right? It could be considered to be active income, right? If you're somewhere in the middle, be careful because it could be considered to be active income. Some people suggest hiring a property manager and make it clear that you are just receiving the profits of that business, but you're not part of the operations. Is investing in stocks considered active income? No. Can I volunteer while on an NLV? Yes, as long as you don't get paid. Still working at the time of application. And this is also to show you the feeling depending on the applicant's location. So in the UK, people say a P45 is one way, but so is a letter from your employer stating that you have resigned and will leave on a certain date, usually before the visa start date. But also people say, looks like it's a bit of a potluck if they accept a letter from HR department in place of a P45 if you're working up to the last minute. And people still ask every single week, like, can I work until the very end? And I don't see any clear answers. What I see in the UK is that consulates will require you a P45 in most cases. BLS offices will require a P45. And what I see is that maybe they're ready to accept you and to grant you the visa, but they see that you don't have a P45, so they will give you 10 days to provide one, and then they will give you the visa. Okay, this is a little bit the situation in the UK. In the US, they tend to be a little bit more open, and if you read the requirements or explanations in the websites of each of the consulates, you will see that they accept the possibility of that you are taking a sabbatical year, that you are going to be working until your visa is granted. But there's been also cases of people having problems. Okay, for example, this person in Houston in June 2025, Houston BLS rejected the application because retirement was still in the future, even if the future resignation date was prior to the visa start request. Okay, so this person said, like, yeah, I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna quit on June 1st. Please start the visa on June 2nd. Yes, so I'm not working, right? Everything should be fine. No, this applicant was told they can only apply after officially retiring with updated documents. Okay, so this is again crazy, but also in line with other crazy consulates. Now in Washington DC consulate require resignation proof dated before visa start and sworn statement of no work in Spain. Yeah, so they were more open to this situation, right? And this was in July. And this is a young, I believe it's a young couple who posted this. Right. So as I said, the younger that you are, the closer look you will get about the possibility of working. This is a special case, end of 2023. Not in the US, not in the UK. That was in Buenos Aires city, my origin city. And this was a Venezuelan national who applied for a non-lucrative visa and got denied because the authorities said that he was showing activity in LinkedIn. So this is also a discussion in the groups that, oh, Spanish authorities don't have the right to Google you, yes, and see who you are, what you're doing, etc. But it seems that they can. And in fact, this person went to court in Madrid and challenged this decision. And Madrid said, yes, it's correct. You should be denied because you were showing activity in LinkedIn. So be extremely careful with the consulates. And circling back to the possibility of working remotely for non-Spanish companies, that's a gray area. But that's a gray area once you get the visa. Okay, in the consulates, it's not a gray area. You cannot work. You cannot work at all, right? Whether you will promise to not work before the visa is granted, this is again a very difficult point to explain, and it will depend a lot on the consulate and even the person reviewing your case. So if you're in this situation, I wouldn't call it straightforward, so always go with legal advice. Now, let's talk about marriage, birth certificates, non-married couples. Married couples need a valid and updated certificate. So if you married in 1976, that certificate is no longer valid. Usually it has a 6-month validity, so you need to get a new certificate. If you're bringing children, they also need new birth certificates, okay? And non-married couples can also apply as a couple, but they need to prove that they are couples. The best way to prove it is showing that you are legal partners, okay? But if you don't have the legal partnership, you can show that you are stable partners with 1+ year cohabitation proven, or if you have children together, you're having a strong case, okay? But maybe you don't have all that. You have to, you show your pictures of your holidays in Thailand, whatever, but maybe it's going to be a weaker case, and it will depend on the official whether this person takes you as a couple or not. Possible solutions, applying both as main applicants, and therefore the financial threshold will go much higher, by 4, in fact. Now, all these certificates must be apostilled in the country or state that issued them. For example, if you got married in California, it's a state apostille. If you got married in Cyprus, you need to get the apostille from Cyprus or Trinidad and Tobago. And sometimes those countries take longer time than the police checks. So always start with the longest thing to obtain, right? And always sworn translated to Spanish. But if you got married, for example, in Colombia or Argentina, those countries speak Spanish. Therefore, you won't need to sworn translate them. But still, you will need to apostille them. Yes. What about adult children and ascendants? They cannot be dependents any longer and must apply as main applicants as of May 20th, 2025. What is an adult children? Your children over 18 years old of age. And ascendants were parents or in-laws. Fortunately, this changed. And there are other types of visas who still permit to get adult children with you, like the digital nomad visa, for example. If you want to read the law, the Article 61 of the law, you can see there underlined in red everything that I'm mentioning. Now, what are sworn translators? We have mentioned them many times here. These are not common normal translators. These are special translators that are only appointed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Spain. They pass a hard exam to become certified, and they get a unique registration number. Their translations are accepted by Spanish institutions, including Spanish consulates abroad, and their translations can be done remotely and signed with a legally valid electronic signature. Therefore, you don't need to ship papers overseas so that you get the translations. You just send the digital scans of the documents, you agree on the price, on delivery date, you get the translation with a stamp. It is a digital translation in an email as an attachment. You print it out, and that's what you put in your filing. That's how it works. And of course, you can find my recommended sworn translators in spainguru.es, who are extremely used to the type of documentation that is usually handled for the non-lucrative visa submissions. Can I use any translator from the American Translator Association? I mentioned this because Miami and Los Angeles mentioned this association as a possibility to translate your documents, but it is misleading, okay, at best, because this association has nothing to do with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Spain. And that is the only authority that can certify, okay, or, a sworn translator, right? Potentially any sworn translator, I don't know the conditions to become part of this association are, but a sworn translator from Spain can potentially become a member of this association, but has nothing to do. So yes, get a sworn translator. Can sworn translators work with several language pairs? No, one sworn translator can be only certified for one language pair. For example, English, Spanish, Spanish, English. This is a language pair, okay? Now, if you need several language pairs, for example, you got married in Germany or France, whatever, Turkey, you can find sworn translators for any language pairs on spainguru.es. How much do sworn translators translations cost? So it will depend on the complexity of the document, how fast you want the document, but for the usual type of documents that you need for submitting this visa, it will be around 40 euros per page. They will tell you one thing of another. And also some consulates are much stricter than others, okay? In the UK, they seem to be stricter, right, than in the US, but all the cases happen. If you're in this situation, again, if you are not a straightforward case, yes, use a lawyer, okay? A lawyer that can defend you in case you get a denial or some friction, or you get asked for extra documents, okay? Because the lawyer will know the ins and outs of this situation, right? Not every lawyer, but people who do this every day, right? Now, in the UK, the best that you can show to prove that you are retired is a P45 form. In the US, resignation letter, termination letter from your employer, both translated and notarized. If you're freelancers in the US, notarized affidavit promising not to work. And in the UK, they're quite strict. A letter from HMRC and accountant stating having ceased trading and the register for self-employment. Should I quit before I get the visa? Now, I know Manero from Stern Abogados will tell you, what comes first, apostille then sworn translation? So most lawyers will tell you, you need to sworn translate everything, the original certificate and the apostille itself, even if it comes in several languages, okay? Because it doesn't contain the full content of the original certificate, right? But some people choose not to sworn translate everything to save some money. They just sworn translate the original certificate, and the apostille, they don't sworn translate it. And most of the time, they don't have any problem. But some of them, as I said, if the official reviewing your case that morning dropped the coffee out of his table, could say, there is a sworn translation missing here. You only have 10 days to supply it, and then you will have to do it. So be careful and ready to get an urgent sworn translation service in case that happens, okay? So it has fixed that problem. Now, also, a lot of people ask, should I sworn translate my 100-page bank statements? That, of course, if you do a little calculation, will translate everything. The original certificate and the apostille itself, even if it can give you a big number in cost of sworn translation. So most people don't. 77% of people don't sworn translate it, as long as the bank statements are in English. Some people choose to sworn translate at least the summary pages, 17%. Some people, 3%, sworn translated everything. And this also happens most of the time when you work with lawyers. They usually have either agreements or in-house sworn translators that will sworn translate everything, included in the price of the packaging that you hired. So there is no problem, okay, of missing sworn translations or anything. Then other people have the option of their banks will provide statements in Spanish. This is the case of Chase in the States, and I don't know if there's any other bank that provided this. So this is the situation with the bank statements from translations. As you can see, there's not a clear answer or instructions about this. Of course, if your bank statements are in Arabic or in Chinese letters, that's not probably going to be accepted by the Spanish consulates for sure, in my opinion. Now, let's talk about more updates as of May 20th, 2025. There's no major changes, okay, since that date, okay, except that, some consulates want more certificates from the bank. No plans to make the NLV stricter. Many rumors online are clickbait, okay? And this is the May 20th, 2025 update mainly affected US consulates, okay? But not so much other consulates. As we said, they're asking for more. 77% of people don't sworn translate it, as long as the bank statements are in English. Some people choose to sworn translate at least the summer certificates from the banks just to eliminate the possibility of frauds or fraudulent transfers. Okay, people who receive just the transfer just to show that you have enough money and then they gave it the money back and stuff like that, right? Now, specific consulates news, okay? Manila in the Philippines, they were always very strict, especially with working age applicants, okay? More scrutiny there. Southeast Asia, generally easier on requirements. Latin America and Middle East, usually tougher and more detail-oriented. UK consulates, no recent changes. The list of requirements is the same, okay, as before. There's nothing that changed. And remember that each consulate is very, very different. Now, let's go a little bit with more focus into USA and the UK. The UK is simpler, okay? The consulates are much more harmonized, okay? And they don't require tax returns, okay? But they are quite strict about showing proof of not working, okay, or P45, as we mentioned before, although some people got away just showing a letter from HR, okay? This is also a possibility. Bank documents must be legalized and apostilled, okay? This is one thing a lawyer who is doing applications in this country, okay? But it is not very. I'm not quite sure that this is the rule, okay? But it's something that we need to go into the group, the Spain Guru Non-Lucrative Visa group, and ask, okay, for your specific consulate, like, how are you guys doing this? Did you apply after May 20th? And did you legalize or apostille your bank statements or your bank documents, okay, the certificates? Or not. Generally, the bank statements don't need to be apostilled, but if you're gonna supply a certificate from the bank, okay, potentially you want to legalize it and apostille it, potentially, okay? Now, USA, it varies much more than the UK, okay? So every consulate is different. So the bank statements will include or must include full name, address, account ID, okay? Don't blur it, just show everything. No missing pages or reductions, opening and closing balances each month, December 31st balance, average yearly balance, last tax return required, no apostille needed for financial documents, okay? The visas fees are much different. In the UK, you pay much more, okay? These are round numbers, okay, around 600, and in the USA, it's just 120 euros, okay? Round numbers. There are extra expenses as well, like from the BLS offices, that they ask you like certain amount of money just to, send you the visa back to your home. Somebody in Edinburgh was telling like 24 pounds to get the visa back via snail mail. Now, US consulate examples, Los Angeles, this is, depending who you ask, they will tell you different thing. But this lawyer said that no loans, no mortgages are allowed. This was historically something that was happening, but a lot of people at LA consulate now working with BLS with mortgages and nothing happened. Some lawyers will tell you something in between. They tell you like, if you have a mortgage, prepare for it. Like, don't show it, show other bank accounts. We'll frame it, we'll show the information in a way that the mortgage doesn't get on the way. So depending who you ask, they will have different strategies just to overcome this. And some people will tell you, no, that was something of the past. Chicago must show 3-month lease, okay? And as I said, some lawyers will say, I will never comply with this crazy requirement. But some people say, yeah, okay, let's do it. And some people, well, let's get it for 3 months, and then either I reduce it or I just cancel it, which is not great either. New York, processed by the consulate, not BLS. This is important, and it works quite well with appointments, I have to say. I recently released an article where I summarize all the problems with requesting an appointment at all the US consulates, and I had to say that New York City was pretty good. Okay, and this was the consulate. Miami, 12 months bank statements, notarized affidavit not to work. Boston, no IRA 401k accepted, 3 years of tax returns, 3 months of statements only, not 12. Washington, D.C., 3-month lease, as we saw in the slide before, this is true. Motivation letter and affidavit not to work. San Francisco, proof not working required. So I guess they are more strict with San Francisco about like proving that you don't have plans of working or that you have retired already at time of application. And Houston, 12-month statements, affidavit explaining reason to move. Work history, promise not to work. I could also add the lease question, the lease requirement, and also school enrollment for kids for Houston. So that's why Houston, a lot of people say like Houston is the worst. Can I apply in another consulate? I have the possibility to go live with my aunt in Miami. Okay, maybe I should do it. Yes, a lot of people are thinking about that. But what I see is that, yeah, Houston is a little bit erratic. Some people say like, well, this was wonderful, super smooth, everything perfect. And some people say like they found a lot of blocks on their ways, like that person who didn't retire and could not submit their paperwork. Now remember, free to use and watch Spain Guru's YouTube channel with more than 1,000 videos, 500 of them, 50% about the non-lucrative visa. I release 1 video per day, okay, and I try to add a lot of value for absolutely free. The only thing I ask you, if you watch the videos and you learn something new, give a like and it will really, really help. Remember, there's a Q&A session at the end that we're going to soon get into it, okay? But if you have to leave earlier, you can always leave a review in Trustpilot. There's a button there on the top, okay? And if you're watching this video via YouTube later, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you can. Now, let's go to during the application. I'm going very much into detail today. So this is a bit long, but I think it is better to go in depth because this visa has a lot to talk about. Application process. All family members must apply. Consider in-person application and/or pickup with all applicants, unless you pay to be sent your passport. Some consulates only work by mail, for example, Panama Consulate, but it's not the case anymore in the US or UK. Some consulates use a combination or give you the option. For example, Melbourne in Australia used to be by mail, but now you have to have an in-person appointment. NLV grants a 90-day window to arrive to Spain, but this is changing as we speak. Many people are getting 365 days validity period. I have a video where I talk with Ainhoa Manero about this new validity period because it's not clear whether you still have to enter Spain within the first 90 days of that 365 validity period. It is also not clear that you cannot do it, okay? So still at this very early stage, a lot of people say like, okay, if I can, I will enter it within the first 90 days. Because there is a communication, some sort of official communication saying like, no, the 90-day period is still applying, even if you get the visa validity for 1 year. The visa validity for 1 year was because people, once they're in Spain, they take weeks, if not months, to get their residency card, and they couldn't get out of Spain because their visa was expired, so they were in no man's land. So we're going to extend the visa validity for 1 year, but it doesn't mean that you should enter after 90 initial days. So this is the situation with that, okay? So my advice in this case, and this is the advice of Ainhoa, is that if you can, enter within the first 90 days of the visa validity period to be on the safe side, okay? If you can't, then no problem. We haven't heard of anyone having a problem entering after that. As long as the visa was issued with a 1 year validity period, which can also not happen. I've seen people like last week who were issued their visa for 90 days again. So depending on the consulate, depending on the person typing on the computer, you get one thing or another. Right? Typical thing that will happen now is that you're going to get it for 1 year. Common mistakes to avoid. Not checking specific consulate requirements. Check the requirements in English, in Spanish from the consulate. Check the BLS requirements, usually only in English, and also internal requirements that you can hear from Spain Guru's Non-Lucrative Visa Facebook group. First-hand experiences. Check the dedicated pages for the consulates and read about the first-hand experiences that I try to update as fast as I can. And always look at the dates because things evolve all the time. Submitting wrong documents, expired documents, wrong chronology, starting with the easy stuff at the beginning and leaving the hard stuff at the end. Wrong health insurance, okay, with co-payments, reimbursements, wrong certificate of coverage, etc. Say that you plan to work or not enough proof, or you don't convince enough the consulate that you're not going to be working. The younger you are, the more convincing you have to be. The timing for the visa application. Normally, you start 6 months before gathering documentation, starting to obtain it, and then in the UK, it tends to be faster if you have a straighter case. Remember that most consulates will retain your passport during the processing, but if you have to travel during that processing time, that can be quite long. US applicants have the possibility to get a second passport, which is quite easy for them, but the UK is very, very hard. Now, the UK consulates and some other consulates abroad have issued now a form where you can request to keep your passport, but it's not possibly not the consulate, but I heard that Manchester has it. How long does the process take? Documents preparation, 2 to 3 months. Attending the appointment on the 3rd month. These are ballpark figures. Wait for approval. Okay, it can be some days, 2 months approximately. Now Manchester is taking 12 weeks and should not be more than 3 months. Okay, and this is all changing by the new regulation. We're going to talk about that. 10 days period if clarifications and extra documentations is asked. You can choose the visa start date in a 90-day window from application. Clarifications and date. This is changing. Unofficially, you have 30 days to obtain your residency plastic card after 30 days of entering Spain. Okay, that will be valid for 1 year. Okay, usually coinciding with the start date with the enter date in Spain within the visa validity period. So it's going to be valid for 1 year. After that, you will, and just before that expiration, you can start your renewal process. Okay, and someone was saying that they had problems with the health insurance because they wouldn't extend the start date in the future. And most companies will do only 2 months in advance. Some companies will do 1 month in advance. But if you use my recommended exclusive agent, Carlos Blanco, he can extend it in the future and therefore relieving you of one less headache. This is a way to see it. Okay, every segment there is 1 month. So, for example, you submit your paperwork, your visa application on date A, right? And you can choose to start it after the processing sometime after the 90 days after the submission date. Okay, let's say that you get your visa granted and the consulate grants you the visa within that period and starts your visa in the half of the 3rd month. Okay, since the submission date. Okay, 2 months and a half, you get your visa, it starts. Okay, then you will get your visa for 1 full year, okay, of validity. But if you want to be on the safe side, you should travel to Spain within the first 90 days, okay? This is the situation that we are today. You decide to travel on letter C, right, within 90 days. And then once you entered, you have 30 days. Officially, you get your TIA card. No one does. There's no appointments. So don't worry if that doesn't happen, but officially it's 30 days, right? And imagine that you enter, I don't know, July 2nd, 2026. Your TIA card should expire on July 1st, 2027, okay? So 60 days before the expiration date, you can start renewing your visa, and it's actually recommended that you do your renewal 60 days before, because if in case that anything bad happens or there's a denial or some friction, whatever, you can do it again, and you will still be legally in Spain, okay? Another way to see the process is like this, but of course, this is illustration, and it just could change anything, okay, any steps. But you could see that first, you would find your assigned consulate, know if they work with BLS for this visa. You will check the official requirements. You will collect the necessary documents, usually starting by the police checks. Then you will get your medical certificate with a 3-month validity. Usually the police checks is 6 months validity. You will apostille and sworn translate necessary docs, okay? If you're moving with family, birth certificate, potentially marriage certificate or legal partnership, then you will sort out your private health insurance or obtain your S1 form if you're a UK pensionist, if you want. You will book your appointment, okay? Usually this should start it even earlier, okay? And then you will attend the appointment, you will wait, you'll submit, and you will wait for notification, and you will collect your visa, and you will receive your visa. You will travel to Spain. You will obtain the Empadronamiento. Usually, we're going to talk about the arrival steps. This is only one, but it's important. That is the registration of your rental contract at the city hall, so that you have a proof of address. Okay, and that proof of address, called the Empadronamiento, will be used in 90% of cases to obtain your residency card once you get an appointment at the police station. Another way to see it is different time frames for the different milestones. First milestones: police check, marriage certificate, birth certificate. You will get it in February. It will be valid for 6 months. You will apostille, sworn translate it. Then you will get financial documents on April. Medical certificate on April 2, for example, validity period 3 months. You will get your health insurance very close from the appointment. And then you will have started to try to get the appointment a couple of months before. You will get the appointment. You will submit your paperwork, wait for the processing period, and then you will start your coverage when the visa starts, and then you will travel to Spain. It is a very easy and simple way to see it. Now there is some changes in all these time frames, okay, as per the new regulations, and I can show you the articles later on. But applications should now be submitted no later than 2 months before your planned arrival to Spain, so leaving enough time for the processing. You can submit your application as early as 6 months and up to 2 months prior to your intended entry date. Okay, this is changing. Okay, it's not very clear if it's being applied as of today, but I will show you the regulation, and it should be applied like this in the following months. Okay, date. This is changing. Unofficially, you have 30 days to obtain your residency plastic card after 30 days of entering Spain. Okay, that will be valid for 1 year. Okay, usually coinciding with the start date with the enter date in Spain within the visa validity period. So it's going to be valid for 1 year. After that, you will, and just before that expiration, you can start your renewal process. Okay. And someone was saying that they had problems with the health insurance because they would, but this is the way the authorities do it. They take the rule out, but this, they roll it out, and then they expect that the consulates adapt to those rules, but sometimes that in reality doesn't happen overnight, right? Supposedly the decision should be given with a month deadline. So if you don't get the decision after 1 month, don't get worried. It doesn't mean that you're denied, but technically, this is an administrative silence, negative administrative silence, and technically and legally, you are entitled to start a process in order to get a decision from the consulate, okay? So technically, it is considered a default rejection, but it could come that you are accepted later on, and this is what normally happens, at least as of today. And this is the Article 63, okay, of the regulation, and there you have highlighted the text that I'm talking about. Now, coming back to taxes, if you plan to sell your home, which is quite common, be careful because you could be paying capital gains tax in Spain for the sale of that home. Now, there are ways to mitigate capital gains tax in Spain for the sale. If you're older than 65, if you sold your home that primary residency, and that where you were in the previous 3 years, if you use the total proceeds to buy a new home in Spain, blah, blah, blah. But the best way to do it is just to time your move to Spain so that you sell your home in a different tax year from the tax year that you will become a tax resident in Spain. Easy to understand. Tax years from January 1st to December 31st. So on January 1st, it's a new tax year. Therefore, if you sell your home on December 31st and you move to Spain on January 1st, it's a different tax year. So you won't be liable for capital gains tax, right? So this is planning your move. This is the first case in this slide, right? You sell your home in 2024, you move to Spain in 2025. But if you sell your home at the beginning of the year, tax year, make sure not to spend 183 days during the same tax year. Otherwise, you will become a tax resident retroactively from January 1st that same year, that same calendar year, therefore being liable for capital gains tax, which are ranging 19% to 30%. So for 100K proceeds, you will be paying around 22% effective tax rate. That is 22,000 euros that you could be potentially saving. Now, if you want to know more about this tax and generally about taxes, pensions, 401ks, Roth IRAs, and if you are from the UK, the US, I have many articles about this: inheritance in Spain, gift tax, etc. And of course, as I said, you can join my Spanish taxes webinar for absolutely free. Now, let's talk about after the approval. Living in Spain on a non-lucrative visa. There's two ways to arrive to Spain. We mentioned Schengen area. You can arrive from outside of Schengen or to Spain, or from another Schengen country to Spain. First case, you fly from New York to Madrid, you will get the AES system or a police officer put a stamp on your passport, or you will get your face scanned, doesn't matter. That counts as your entry to Spain. You have proof of entry to Spain. But if you're older than 65, if you sold your home that primary residency, and that where you were in the previous 3 years, if you use the total proceeds to buy a new home in Spain, blah, blah, blah. But the best way to do it is just to fly from New York to Rome. You do a little cruise in the Mediterranean, take some photos of the Greek islands. Then you take your car, you go to France, and then you cross by car to Spain. You will not get an immigration post there. You will not get a stamp or EES or anything. And the Spanish authorities will not know exactly when you enter Spain. They will know when you enter Schengen, but not Spain, right? And that could be a potential friction. In order to avoid this, you will need to prove your entry to Spain, because you will need to prove your date of entry to Spain once you obtain your residency card at the police station later on. Some people said, like, I didn't have any problem. I showed my boarding passes. I showed my gas tickets, blah, blah, blah. The police officer was a nice guy. He was happy. He was smiling and just started the visa the day I told him to start. Some other people had the wrong experience, different one. Police officer was not very helpful. He didn't like it and told me that I had to get out of Schengen and come back in to get a an entry date. The best way to avoid this is getting a declaración de entrada, which is a one-page document. You can obtain it from Spaingroup.es. I have an article how to fill it. You print it out, you fill it, and you go to a police station in the airport or in the city close to the border, because those police stations are used to issuing these documents. Many people reported going to another police station somewhere else in Spain, and they don't know what they were talking about. But what you want is a stamp from the police proving that you enter Spain. So this is the situation. Always enter during the visa validity period. Some people choose to enter before as tourists, but that can also bring different problems once you obtain your residency card, like starting it even earlier and therefore having to renew it even earlier, and they weren't counting on that. Get a Spanish SIM card. Keep your SIM card from your origin country so that you can operate your bank accounts elsewhere. Get a Spanish SIM card because you will need to get an SMS from the different procedures that you are applying for appointments, etc. Okay, and if you want to know more about really like the first steps into entering Spain, one of the best ways you can do it is just like you go here to your step-by-step move to Spain checklist, and here you have after arrival, right? And after arrival, you have here declare your entry, register your address and get Empadronamiento, get your TA card, open in the Mediterranean, take some photos of the Greek islands. Then you take your car, you go to France, and then you cross by car to Spain. You will not get an immigration post there. You will not get a stamp. Spanish bank account, set up your phone service, settle in and join the community, obtain a digital certificate. I'm every day adding more stuff that people say that it was useful to have once you're in Spain. Also, before even entering to Spain, for example, getting your international driving license was important. Sending stuff, transfer money, opening platforms to transfer money like Wise accounts or Currency Direct for bigger amounts, etc., etc. So yes, definitely that resource is free. It's free, absolutely free, just for you guys to use, and definitely has everything in one single place. You can access it from mobile phone. So yes, and you have also articles that are linked articles and also vetted professionals who can help you with each of those steps. Now, open a non-resident bank account. As I said, it's important because you will take weeks or even months to get your residency card. Won't be without the bank. You will be without a bank account in Spain until then? No. So just go to a brick and mortar bank, Santander, BBVA, La Caixa, Sabadell, whatever, and say like, hi, here's my passport. This is my entry to Spain. This is my visa. Give me a non-resident bank account. They will give you a non-resident bank account. You can pay your rent, taxes, rent, utilities, gym, whatever you want. Okay, but you need an IBAN in Spain. I think that's extremely, extremely helpful. Obtain an empadronamiento. We mentioned that once you get a rental contract, where in the place where you're living, it is important that to obtain a proof of address. Now, lawyers will argue that in order to obtain the residency card, you don't need to have an empadronamiento, but in 95% of the police stations will ask you one. Okay, so again, you want to add friction or you want to have it. So empadronamiento usually has a 3-month validity. You bring your rental contract. Most ayuntamientos or city halls require at least a 6-month long rental contract. So if you're signing 3 months, 2 months, they will consider it to be a touristic rental. They will not give you an empadronamiento in most places. Okay, but it depends on the city hall. So always, once you know where you're moving to, try to understand that so that you don't sign rental leases that you won't be able to get an empadronamiento. Talk to the landlord as well. Like, hey, can I get my empadronamiento in your place if we sign the lease? Yes or no? And yes, officially you have 30 days to get your residency card. So but it is very, very hard to obtain appointments. So we mentioned the declaración de entrada. There's the URL of this article below. You can always send me an email to hello@spaingroup.es, and I can always answer you and send you the links if you missed anything. Now, yeah, this is screenshots of people who are talking about it's impossible to get appointments in Valencia, for example, or Alicante. Yes, 5 months, 4 months. So yeah, at least now you get your visa valid for 1 year, and it has multi-entry, so you can use it to travel back and forth from Spain. And yes, what I said, not always is necessary the appointment, the empadronamiento for the TA card, for the residency card. But if you go to smaller police stations, they will ask for it. So it's great to have it. Now, let's talk about renewal process. We said that after 1 year, the expiration date of your TA card, 60 days before that expiration date, you can start your renewal process. okay? And up to 90 days after expiration, but no one recommends going in that period, okay? And we said you will need to prove double the amount in 2 years, right? So if you apply as a couple, 36,000 euros, you will need to prove that you will have 72,000 euros in 2 years, okay? Again, it can be passive income, savings, or a combination of both, right? And depending on the place where they're renewing, the funds, most 90% of cases, people have their funds in other accounts outside of Spain, but in some provinces like Canary Islands, and I heard Valencia province, they prefer to see money movements in a Spanish bank account before that. So always find out, always ask others that are renewing those provinces what they're doing, okay? And after 5 years, so the first initial year, first renewal for 2 more years, second renewal for 2 more years, total 5 years, you could potentially be eligible for the long-term residency with certain requirements as well. And I highly recommend you going for that type of residency because it's much, much better than the non-lucrative residence. For example, it comes with work permits. You can be outside of Spain longer time. You don't have to show health coverage after you get the long-term residency. So it's much better, more favorable. Now, this is again huge discussion about this. People say that now after the new the new regulation of the law, okay, the bylaw, included a minimum stay requirement of 183 days per year, immigration year, so natural year, in order to renew your non-lucrative visa or any temporary visa, okay? But the problem is that there is a Supreme Court ruling saying that that requirement is not legal, and they should delete that requirement as they did in the previous regulation. There was 180 days minimum stay requirement that was deleted. Okay, and I have all the screenshots, but I'm not going to go too long about this. But basically, this minimum stay requirement, the Supreme Court of Spain says that it should be included in the main organic law, not in the lower regulation of the law as they did. Okay, and therefore this shouldn't apply. And therefore, if they deny you your non-lucrative visa renewal because of having stayed less than 183 days, you can fight this in court and you will win it for sure, 100%. These are the words of Ainhoa Manero. Okay. So there is legal ambiguity because the legislators insist in including this into a regulation of the law, which doesn't take as much political agreement, less processes, less controls and everything. But the Supreme Court, which has the final word on the legal framework of this country, says that it should not be there. Okay. This is the situation in which we are. Yes. 5 months, 4 months. So yeah, at least now you get your visa valid for 1 year. And it has multi-entry, so you can use it to travel back and forth from Spain. And yes, what I said, not always is necessary the appointment, the Empadronamiento for the TA card, for the residency card. But if you go to smaller police stations, and I'm talking about the renewal only. If you want to go for the non-lucrative, for the long-term, and I'm talking residency, there are minimum stay requirements. If you're going to apply for the Spanish citizenship, there are minimum stay requirements, right? And those overlap. All those requirements overlap. Yes, I'm just talking exclusively about the possibility of renewing the non-lucrative residence, okay, or visa, as you may call it. But if you want to go for the other residencies, be careful because you need to comply with those requirements. We're going to talk about them later on. Renewal process case study. Couple, they need to show 72,000 euros in 2 years. These are in provinces that residency, there are minimum stay requirements. If you're going to apply for the Spanish citizenship, required 2 years, for example, Alicante, right? Main applicant has an annual pension of 30,000 euros. And I said annual. That means that in 2 years, this person will have 30,000 euros times 2, right? So this person has proven 60,000 euros pension in 2 years period, right? So they only need 12,000 euros more to get to those 72,000 euros. Could be savings, could be dividends, could be rental income. Yes, could be credit from a credit card, right? And we mentioned that rental income sometimes was a bit dangerous, depending on the province, okay, or the consulate. So always find out that. Documentation requirements: ongoing private medical insurance coverage, so no gaps in coverage. So be careful when you renew, not going to the convention especial for the first renewal. Okay, and always be covered. Updated passport copies for both individuals and no police records. Okay, people get police records, so you don't have to supply this background check from Spain. They will check it automatically, I believe. But some people, for example, drive under the influence once they are in Spain, and they could be denied because of this. Okay, so be careful. Don't drink before going behind the wheel. Local town hall registration. Now for the renewal, it is required to have an empadronamiento. Although people said that they didn't show with an empadronamiento in some provinces and they were still fine. okay? But always try to get it, and always remember it has a 3-month validity, so always you need to be updating it, okay? And always be covered. Updated passport copies for both. Now, the minimum stay requirements. We said that for the renewal of the non-lucrative residence, okay, it is an ambiguous situation now because Supreme Court said that should not be any minimum stay requirements in the regulation. It should be in the main law, which is not the case. But if you're going to go for the long-term residence after 5 years, remember that you can't be outside of Spain more than 10 months in the previous 5 years. Could go up to 12 months if it was for work reasons, but of course that would be controversial because supposedly you shouldn't be working under non-lucrative residence, right? Some provinces allow you to do a third renewal, so 7 years under non-lucrative residence, but not all the provinces allow it. For example, Galicia doesn't, and I don't have the list of the ones who allow it or who don't, because most people don't do it. They just go 5 years and then they go for a long-term residence. But if you're planning to apply for the nationality, Spanish nationality, if you're holder of a temporary residence, for example, you are dual passport holder and you go for the 2 years fast track, Latin Americans, Andorra, Philippines, Guinea Equatorial, and these passport holders can benefit from a 2-year fast track residence only period, whereas most of the other passport holders is 10 years. And so you can apply for the non-lucrative residence as a Mexican, for example. You spend 2 years of residence in Spain and you apply for the Spanish citizenship. But remember not to have been outside of Spain more than 90 days each of those 2 years, okay? And they are not additional, okay? Not 6 months. If you were all the first year all the time in Spain, you cannot be 6 months out the second year, okay? It's maximum 3 months per year. Now, if you're a holder of long-term residency, you cannot be outside of the EU more than 1 year consecutively or no more than 30 months in 5 years, okay? So remember, all these requirements overlap. It's not that one takes away the other, okay? If you wanna, and this is why it's so important that you consult with an immigration expert, because if you have the plans and the objective of staying in Spain for the long term, you have to have a clear pathway, a clear strategy on how to do, or what to do exactly, so that you comply with every single requirement in order to accomplish your objectives of staying in Spain for the long term, right? So it's important that you talk with an immigration expert who knows all this and who has everything in mind for you, so that you know, everything is done smoothly without surprises, because there's so much regulation going on here, so many requirements for the different things, etc., and so many potential pathways and strategies to follow that you can get a little bit confused, okay? And you can pay a very high price for a small mistake. Unfortunately, this is how Spanish bureaucracy is. Now, common pathways to transition to work permit after 1 year, and I want to make it clear, I've been criticized by this. It's not that after 1 year of residency, automatically you can get a work permit. No, not at all. You have to comply with the requirements that can be very tough, very difficult, but I know many people who did, for example, my wife, okay, to get a work permit after having a residence in Spain, okay? So after 1 year of residence under non-lucrative visa, okay, and it is recommended that first you renew it and then you apply for the modification, because in case you are denied of the modification to obtain the work permit, you still have the renewal for 2 more years, okay? So be careful with that. You could potentially go for a work permit cuenta propia, which is you start your own business, you have a project, you need to prove that it's going to be profitable, you have to show a business plan and everything, and maybe you get approved, potentially, and you get a cuenta propia work permit, or you get sponsored by a company, they give you a job offer, you accept it and everything, and that's cuenta ajena, okay? Work permit, cuenta ajena. And potentially you could also transition to a digital nomad visa, which is controversial because you should have been working remotely for the previous 3 months before going on a digital nomad visa, and you shouldn't have been doing that, right? So it is controversial, but it is happening, and it is people are transitioning from their let's say gray area remote work and non-lucrative residence into a digital nomad residency, okay? We mentioned that certain countries can have a fast track of only 2 years by residence in order to be eligible to apply for the Spanish citizenship. Those are the countries in red. Countries in gray usually is 10 years, and okay? It is an ambiguous situation now because Supreme Court said that should not be any minimum stay requirements in the regulation. It should be in the main law, which is not the case. But if you're going to go for the long-term residence after 5 years, remember that you can't be outside of Spain more than 10 months in the previous 5 years. could go up to 12 months if it was for work reasons, but of course that would be controversial because supposedly you shouldn't be working by residence. But for example, if you marry a Spaniard, it goes down to 1 year, okay, and other situations, okay, for example, Sephardic origin, etc., etc., asylum seekers, etc. Remember, Spenguru.es, it's all free. You can join my newsletter, opt out anytime. Every single week I send it with news, top discussions, top most watched video, investigation articles, etc. YouTube channel with more than 7,000 subscribers, free, 1,000 videos plus 500 of them are non-lucrative visa, one video per day situations, okay? For example, Sephardic origin, okay? Blog with more than 2,000 articles and the Facebook groups, the Spanish non-lucrative visa Facebook group, the biggest one out there. Highly recommended to join it. And remember, you can watch my other 5 webinars that you can join today, get the recordings, and this Move to Spain checklist that I already showed you a lot. But if you need expert immigration advice, you are in very good hands. Remember, Spenguru has more than 250 reviews, 5-star reviews. We stood the test of time, so any of my vetted partners are very good, in my opinion. They are very used to deal with people from the US, from the UK, Canada, Australia. They understand their pain points, okay, and yeah, the specifics. So definitely good to engage with them. At least immigration expert consultation and tax advisor consultation. Highly recommended you do it. And then extra services that you may need for your application of your visa. Extra bonus, a poll here that I ran some months ago. That was in March. Have you used professional help versus do it yourself? 50% of people use professional help. 50% of people did it themselves. And then I ask, if you use professional help, it doesn't have to be Spenguru's partners, but any lawyer or any visa company, whatever. Do you think it was money well invested? I would say the majority, 77% of people said that it was money well invested to go with professional help for this visa. For the digital nomad visa, I would say that this goes to 99%. It's a minefield. You need lawyers. You need someone to help you with that. It's very hard to get it by yourself. But this visa, do it yourself, is much better, much easier. And some people said, like, yeah, 23% said no, it wasn't worth the cost. We can stay in touch at hello@spenguru.es. I always answer my emails, so yeah, drop me a line with whatever you like, and I will be happy to point you in the right direction. And of course, we can go to the Q&A session right now. If you have to go earlier, please leave a review on Trustpilot. If you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel. It will make me extremely happy, motivate me so much, help us go up in the algorithm, help others find this content. And of course, I will send you very, very good vibes for your NLV application. Now, let's go to the questions now. I have 4 questions. It's almost 2 p.m. here in Malaga. Today is October 22nd, 2025. Josmar, thank you for joining today. I've heard that Puerto Ricans and their children can apply for citizenship as an Ibero-American. Is that true? Yes, absolutely true. Absolutely true. And if we go to, I'm going to share my screen here. No, this is YouTube, sorry. I'm going to share my screen here. Let's go here, first of all, Spenguru. So Puerto Rico is a special case. It's part of the USA, but Puerto Rican authorities do issue a certificate of citizenship. So if you go here, immigration, we can have here Spanish citizenship as a Puerto Rican. So Spenguru is very, very big on Puerto Ricans moving to Spain. And you can find a Puerto Rican lawyer living in Spain who can give you very specific advice, okay? And Puerto Rican citizenship certificate. This is a private service that I highly recommend you taking because Puerto Rico bureaucracy seems to be made as their ancestors from Spain alike. If that makes sense, it is very slow. It is not great. And yeah, for $125 US, you can get your certificate of citizenship with a $25 off. So it's going to be $100 only. And this is the Certificado de Ciudadanía de Puerto Rico. So the way it works is like if you have parents, even if you were born in the US, for example, but any of your parents were from Puerto Rico island, you can get the Certificado de Ciudadanía, which says here that it never expires. So once you get it, okay? And you can use it anytime in the future to benefit from the 2-year fast track from Spain, okay? So you move to Spain on the non-lucrative residency or digital nomad visa or work permit or whatever, you get a valid residency, you spend 2 years, you don't go out more than 3 months each of those years, and then you apply using the 2-year fast track, proving that you are a Puerto Rican with the Certificado de Ciudadanía, okay? So this is the way it works for Puerto Rico. By the way, I would love to go to Puerto Rico one of these months or years. I think I will go, hopefully, and enjoy that beautiful island. Really, really looking forward to it. And remember also, in order to benefit from the 2-year fast track, you need to be considered by origin, okay? Citizenship by origin, not by naturalization, okay? For example, if you're American and you are like John Doe without any connection to the Puerto Rico island, and you move to Puerto Rico, you can become a Puerto Rican after 1 year by residency, okay? But the certificate of citizenship will say that it's not by ancestry, it's by naturalization, and that won't count for the 2-year fast track. It has to be by origin. So, and Spain respects each of the country's laws on ancestry. And if the country says it's by origin, for example, Mexicans, Article 30 of Constitution of Mexico says that if any of your parents is Mexican, you are Mexican by origin, even if you were born in the Antarctica. Okay. So yes. Christine, thank you so much for joining today. For the renewal, it says that the applicant must be a tax resident in Spain. Does it mean that we need to show a certificado de residencia fiscal? So as I said, this is a very ambiguous situation because of the minimum stay requirement of 183 days, which is challenged by a court decision. Okay, so and also the fact that the tax year and the immigration year may or not overlap. Immigration year is natural year and tax year is calendar year. Okay, so if you move to, actually, if you join my Spanish taxes webinar, I go much more in depth into that. Okay, in showing you like visual slides. And basically, like, you don't have to become a Spanish tax resident in order to renew your non-lucrative residence, okay? The thing is that it will play against you if you want to go for the long-term residence later on, okay? Or if you want to apply for Spanish citizenship, you have minimum stay requirements that will make you a tax resident in Spain, right? But in order to renew the non-lucrative residency, now it is an ambiguous situation, right? And you can play it. If you move after July 2nd, a certain year, right? You will spend less than 183 days that year. And if you leave Spain before July 2nd the following year, you will also spend less than 182 days, but you will be able to renew your non-lucrative residence. Therefore, not becoming a tax resident is not necessarily a way to go, right? So, certificado de residencia fiscal, I have not heard that of being part of the filing. And also, as I said, you could challenge this in court and still and win it. Okay, this is the situation today. This is not legal advice. Please watch the videos with Ainhoa Manero. And if you're in this situation that you want to play it this way, go with legal expertise that knows what they're doing.